Hello and welcome to What's Coming in InSpec 6. This is a very exciting presentation. We're very excited about InSpec 6. It's been a long time coming. We've got a lot of great features. We're going to talk about what's new in InSpec 6, as well as some late changes in InSpec 5. My name's Clinton Wolf. I'm the engineering manager for the InSpec team. I've been with Chef for over 5 years, and I'm very excited to bring you InSpec 6. You're going to meet the entire InSpec team through the course of this presentation. They'll each be presenting to you some of the features that they worked on. So let's talk about InSpec 6. InSpec 6 is going to be a big release. We've got a whole bunch of great new features for you, including new resources for the operating system, new resources for Kubernetes, and new resources for Podman. We've got new outcomes and attestations, which allows you to have more expressive results so that you can dictate a better outcome for your auditors and more expressively show your compliance results to your auditor. And we've got new commands for InSpec that show off InSpec's ability to do new things like sign profiles, suggest profiles for you, and even run profiles in parallel on same targets or multiple targets, or to run the same profile on the same target. You can do all sorts of things with InSpec Parallel. It's very exciting. All right, so let's dive in. New resources. All right, so new operating system resources. We've got all sorts of new operating system resources for InSpec 6, and some of these were released in InSpec 5. We've got all sorts of things, including Linux container, cgroup, IPNAT, PHP config, and PPA. PPA is a re-release of an existing resource that we used to have that we've brought back because by popular demand. We've got Linux audit system, which is a very important resource because it allows you to analyze the auditing system of the operating system itself. Default gateway, several things involving routing tables, including IPNAT, default gateway, and routing table, 3 related things. Mail alias and X509 private key. Now I'd like to introduce you to Sonu. Sonu is our engineer that did the most work on the operating system resources. Sonu, you want to take over?
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Sonu, a software engineer based out of India. I've been part of Progress Chef for 6 months, and it has been a wonderful journey working on InSpec. Today, I'm here to demo 2 of the many core resources which were released in the recent quarter. The 2 resources are Linux audit system and Alexi, that is a Linux container, and both the resources are for Linux OS. Linux audit systems helps examine your system audit rules given audit services installed and running. And the Linux container or the Alexi resource helps verify the properties, state, and existence of containers or virtual machines which are running as part of Alexi instance. So before we test our new resources with the InSpec profile, let us see what audit rules and Linux container we have up running in our system. I'll go ahead and share my screen. So I'm going to connect to my Linux system where I have installed the audit service and the Linux container, that is Alexi. Here we have 2 rules which tells auditee to monitor the etc setup file and etc password files for any write changes or any ownership changes. And to test the Linux container resource, we have here a container named is Ubuntu container. Now we can go ahead and see what's inside our InSpec profiles, where we have written the test to test these new resources. Here's the Linux audit system resource, which is testing that it should be enabled and it should be running. And most importantly, it's checking for the rules to be included. That is the rules to audit this setup etc setup file and etc password file. Down here, we have the Alexi resource, which is again checking that the container should exist, the container passed as the parameter. It should be running. And down here, we are testing some of the properties of the Linux container resource. Finally, we can run this on the target system, which is saying that it is giving the private key and no create log file, given that we don't want any log file, and the sudo flag for the super user privilege. While we wait for the results to pop on the screen, I could briefly give a use case scenario for these resources. CIS benchmarks like the Linux benchmark for Ubuntu or even Debian suggest auditing of a system using audit.ctl. Furthermore, like Linux container resources could be used to test containers or virtual machines that are running as part of the LXD instances. This gives us the flexibility to test the properties and the low-level details too. So here we have the results for the test, and the test seems to be green, which is expected that since we already verified our rules and the audit systems were installed and running. So, yep, I welcome any additional changes or modifications to the resources. That's all from my end. Thank you.
All right, and we're back. Thank you, Sonu. That was fantastic. Wonderful examples of new resources to be had on the OS level. We've got all sorts of great stuff, but we've also got great stuff coming up at the container level with our new Kubernetes resources. We've got all sorts of support for Kubernetes resources, including container, pod, node, config map, and API deployment, namespace, job, cluster role, and daemon set network policy. And all of these are available in plural resources too. So you're able to query not just an individual container, but actually get a list of containers running on a cluster. This is a very powerful feature which allows you to enumerate all sorts of things, pods, nodes, config maps, you name it. And one of the main developers of this was our developer, Satish. Satish, let's meet Satish.
Hey all, first of all, welcome to the ChefConf. Yeah, so myself Satish, and I act as a principal engineer here, taking care of compliance scans, building compliance scans for our Chef compliance division again. So as Clinton described, we have built a list of K8's resources from InSpec. So I know you all would be excited to watch it as a demo. Let me share my screen and start that. Yeah, for this demo, I'm trying to show 3 controls, which involves testing the namespaces, the pods, specifically a specific pod in a specific namespace, and also the existence of a particular config map itself. And this is the command to execute a particular K8's profile, and this is the path of the K8's profile. I'm already into that. I'm just pointing to the current directory. Yeah, while we let it run, the config behind this is basically a simple kubectl config, and anything that can work on a kubectl config is going to be working with our InSpec config as well. Super simple. While it runs, we can also see the InSpec shell. Yeah, and there is a transport called K8s, Kubernetes, which can be used to perform various other activities along with InSpec. And yeah, as we know, kubectl CLI, any output that can be generated from the kubectl CLI can be queried by our InSpec resources now. So as we see the output here, so it was able to validate the namespaces present in the cluster. It was also validate the storage provisioner in a pod in the kube system namespace, and also it was able to query the particular root certificate in the config map itself. Yeah, so let's start some plural resources. So we have K8's namespaces, and let's see. So here, as we can see, it lists down the list of namespaces with its additional attributes. Same thing I can do for pods. Yep. So it is able to list me the entire information for that particular pod. Cool. Yeah, and these are the list of resources that are currently supported with InSpec K8s. And yeah, that's it from me.
That's fantastic. I think that has a lot of potential for people running Kubernetes. I think this will be a very, very important new set of resources for people. All right, so thank you. Thank you, Satish. So moving on, we've got new Podman resources as well. So there's a whole lot of new activity in the container space with InSpec 6. We've got new Podman resources, including Podman Container, Image, Network, Volume, and Pod, and a Podman Train Transport, which allows you to connect directly to the Podman API and connect to a Podman running container. And all of these Podman resources have plural resources associated with them. So you can list Podman containers, list Podman pods, volumes, networks, or images. So all of these things are ready to go. And to tell you all about this is our developer, Vasundhara. Would you like to take over?
Thank you, Clinton. Hi, everyone. I'm Vasundhara, working with Chef InSpec team as principal engineer and been with Chef last 7 years. Today, I'm going to demo how you can use the Chef InSpec Podman Transport to scan your Podman containers and how you can verify the configurations of different Podman resources using Chef InSpec resources. First, I'm going to show how you can use Podman transport. Let me share my screen. Okay, so I have a running Podman container, which is created using the Nginx image. Let's list the containers using Podman command. Podman ps-a will list all the containers. So you can see I have an Nginx container running in the Podman. Now I'm going to execute the Nginx baseline profile on this running container to verify the misconfiguration, if any, in respect of Nginx using Podman transport. So I will use inspec exec command along with the Nginx baseline. This is my profile, which will find few of the misconfigurations, and I'm going to use the Podman transport along with it. And going to use the container ID to connect to it. This is my container ID, and this we need to provide the Podman URL. To connect to a Podman container, the Podman API endpoint URL needs to set. If not set, it will use the default URL. So I'm just showing how that URL looks like. So this is my endpoint URL. Now let's execute this. And you can see few of these controls are passed, that is there are 7 successful controls and 3 failing controls. So these the failing controls are the result of the misconfiguration in the Nginx container. Similarly, you can use a bunch of other CIS profile depending upon which depending upon which OS container is running and application running on those containers. Similarly, we can use the inspec Podman resources to verify the configuration of Podman resources like containers, images, etc. Let's have the quick demo of Podman resources using inspec shell. I'm going to use the inspec shell command to connect to the EC2 instance where my Podman is running. so that I can use my Podman resources onto it. So I'm connecting to the EC2 instance using SSH. Now I'm connected to that instance. I can see the containers running under the Podman using the plural resource Podman containers. You can see the list of containers running inside the Podman. Similarly, you can also check the images inside Podman using podman.images. I will just give you a quick demo of how you can write your controls using this resource. So I'm giving you the example of how you can use the Podman pods resource to verify the configuration. So I'm just verifying that Podman pods should include busy cart write should be running. So this is how you can use the different resources of Podman. So yeah, this is all about Podman transport and Podman resources. With that, I will hand over back to Clinton to walk us through the next exciting features. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vasundhara. That was excellent. Very exciting features about Podman. I think there's a lot of great stuff coming, and we've got such wonderful support for containers in InSpec 6. It's just a wonderful release. And that's a great showcase of InSpec Shell, showing that you can use not only raw resources, but you can also write a control in InSpec Shell and have it execute. So thank you for that. Excellent. So moving on, new outcomes and attestations are a great new set of features for showing your auditors what your compliance profile really is. Let's have a look. So what are enhanced outcomes? Enhanced outcomes is a feature that was developed in collaboration with MITRE, one of our partners. Enhanced outcomes extends control results with new outcomes. Previously in InSpec 5, InSpec supported only 3 outcomes: pass, fail, and skip. And this limited vocabulary didn't reflect the reality of compliance work, because you could often have a control fail to execute due to a technical failure, such as a command binary not being available or a certain package not being installed. Whenever that happened, it wasn't clear as to what the outcome actually should be. Should that be a skip, or should that be a not reviewed? Should that be a failure? Sometimes the test would read as skipped, sometimes it would read as failed. Well, now we're going to clearly mark that as an error. So that is an error occurred outcome, and we're able to clearly communicate that now as an error. We've also got 2 other new outcomes as well: not applicable. We can mark a control as being not applicable whenever the impact falls to 0. If a control has 0 impact, that means that it doesn't apply to you. We can also dynamically assign that by using the new only applicable if DSL keyword. You can also use the not reviewed outcome. That's simply us renaming the skipped outcome to be not reviewed, which we felt was more communicative of the actual outcome. Skipped is less meaningful to an auditor, whereas not reviewed directly communicates the idea that this was simply not reviewed by the system. We did not examine the actual control. These outcomes more closely match the real world needs of auditors. So to show you these enhanced outcomes in practice, we're going to speak with our developer, Nikita. So let's meet Nikita.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nikita Mathur, and I've been working with Chef Progress for the last 1.5 years. And I'm a senior software engineer here, and I live in India. And I think that's enough of info about me. So let's dive into the demo, which is definitely more interesting. So for enhanced outcomes, we have not made a lot of changes with InSpec command, except that we have just introduced a flag that is -- enhanced outcomes. And it's the basic command. You can ignore bundle exec. It's InSpec exec parts of the profile that you want to run enhanced outcomes with, and then the flag. But before I run this and show you all the different outcomes on the screen, let's just briefly go through the profiles. So as Clinton just mentioned, we have introduced 3 different outcomes, which is error, not applicable, and not reviewed. So for errors, I wanted to have certain tests where probably there's some syntax issue, or maybe I've written something completely gibberish. So this is a standard syntax for writing control. This is control, control ID, impact, description, title. And here you can see the wrong syntax is AWS pip deps. I have not even initialized it anywhere. So it's going to be an error. And in the second test, this is testing for Ruby package installation, but clearly I'm using shouldbot. I don't know how to use InSpec. So it's going to show error. Then moving forward, you have test for checking GNOME desktop settings and MySQL security checks. But here you definitely need to have GNOME desktop installed in your system, because if you do not have that, then this test is not applicable, as it says clearly. And even this test needs to have MySQL, otherwise you won't be able to test MySQL password security checks, that it should not be part of ENB. This test is going to do that. But if MySQL is not there, then it's not applicable. So that covers that. Going forward, we have 2 tests here. Now we are trying to test fire alarm here using InSpec, which is pretty stupid, but we can't do that. So InSpec is definitely going to mark this as not reviewed because InSpec can't do that. So we cannot review these 2 controls here. So they are NR. And in the end, we have 2 test controls, which are pretty simple. This is going to fail because /etc is definitely a directory, and I'm checking that it should not be a directory. And this is just a simple test that /temp should be a directory. So these are some of the test cases which I'm going to run enhanced outcomes on. So now let's just see how the output looks here. All these outcomes are going to be in different colors, different symbols, and you will very easily see what are the different outcomes indicating here. So this is some basic info, and then here you can see the first 2 controls have error because AWS pip deps was not part of it. Shouldbot is wrong syntax. So these 2 are definitely a clear error controls. Now these 2 controls, they do not have proper installation here. So they cannot be applied. They cannot be a proper test here. That's why they are NA. And here fire alarms, like I said, it cannot be reviewed. So it's NR. And these 2 are simple failure and passing test. In the end, you can also see there is a summary indicating how many successful controls we have, failure controls we have, not reviewed, and all the other information. And we have also extended this to other reporters in InSpec like JSON, HTML2, but for the showcase purpose, and since CLI reporter is pretty beautiful, you can see here with different colors and different markations. So yeah, InSpec comes with enhanced outcome like this. So yeah, over to you, Clinton.
Thank you very much. I hope that enhanced outcomes will be very useful to people. Enhanced outcomes is available in InSpec 5 as an option and becomes the default in InSpec 6. So that is enhanced outcomes. Looking forward to seeing what people can do with enhanced outcomes. So coming up next, we have attestations. So this was also developed in collaboration with MITRE. They in fact suggested this feature. And we immediately saw the value of this and implemented it. They helped us design the idea, and we found that this suggestion was very powerful. It allows the user to manually specify the result of a control when it cannot automatically be tested. So here the idea is, an example, as Nikita just gave, was testing the fire alarms. So this is something that you can't have InSpec automatically test, but it may indeed be part of your compliance profile. That you may have the requirement that you test the fire alarms, but you can't have InSpec automatically test that. So you have someone go manually test the fire alarms, and then you need to attest, you need to testify that you have indeed tested the fire alarms. So this allows you to provide some sort of explanation or justification that you have indeed performed the test. And then once you've done that, you're able to provide that in a file matched to the control ID. And then InSpec goes through and matches those control IDs up with the attestation and then sets the result as passed or failed, depending on the result of the test that you provide. Justification is required, and then you can optionally provide an evidence URL and an expiration date so that you can have these attestations have a limited time span. And the great thing is it can be provided in YAML to match the waiver file format, JSON to have a machine readable format, or Excel format so that you can do all of this work in Excel, which may be the most familiar format to you, so that your auditor doesn't have to learn YAML. So coming up next, we're going to have Nikita present this because she's the one who worked on it. So here's Nikita again.
Thanks. So I'm going to attest some fire alarms now. All right. So we're back to our previous profile. And like I mentioned, we had 2 fire alarms here and they were not reviewed because InSpec could not test it. But now we can do that if we have the information, if fire alarm 1 is working or not, similarly, if fire alarm 2 is working or not. And we can leverage this information using InSpec. So in InSpec, we introduce the option of -- attestation -file. Here you can pass your attestation file and it could be of any formats like Clinton just mentioned. I'm using YAML format for attesting this profile. So I'm going to attest fire alarm 1 and fire alarm 2, and let's see how that is going to happen. So this is my attestation file. So here I have fire alarm 1, that is a control ID for that test. And I somehow knows that it works and I'm going to pass that test. You can also add the expiration date here. So if you run this test after 2090, then it's definitely going to give you expiration warning. So that's one. Another, here you can also add the failure test. For example, this is not working, so you can set the status as failed. You can also add other control IDs as well. But if those controls are not reviewed, not reviewed, then they will not be attested. So we already know these tests are capable to be tested through InSpec, but fire alarms are not. So let's just see how that goes. So when I'm going to run this, we should be able to see that fire alarm 1 works and 2 doesn't work. And that would be here. So we could see fire alarm 1 here, it had the skip control message, but then finally it got attested and it works. And fire alarm 2, this doesn't work, like we just passed through the attestation files. All the other checks we could see, they are left unaltered and nothing happened with them because they are not reviewed controls. So they will not be attested. And in the end, we can also see now there are 0 controls which are not reviewed because we did the attestation successfully. And this is how you can perform attestation using InSpec. Over to you, Clinton.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that. So that's attestations. I think that people are going to find attestations to be a very useful feature.
Definitely.
Looking forward to seeing what people do with attestations. All right. So while we were working on attestations, we realized that waivers, which only support input by YAML file, that we might as well make waivers support new file formats as well. So waivers now support input by CSV, JSON, and YAML file, but also now waivers also support input by XLS and XLSX, in other words, Excel spreadsheets. So now you can use Excel spreadsheets to input both waivers and attestations. So you can stay in your Excel spreadsheet where you're comfortable, which is a wonderful new feature. We're hoping that auditors will really enjoy that. Okay, so that's it for enhanced outcomes and attestations. New commands. InSpec has a lot of great new commands in InSpec 6. We've got 3 new ones for you. We've got sign, we've got suggest, and we've got parallel. So let's learn about InSpec sign. InSpec sign allows you to create signed binary profile files called IAF files or inspect artifact files. You can execute IAF files just like any other profile, and you can verify IAF files to confirm that they have not been altered. That's the whole idea of signing profiles. They allow you to have a chain of trust between you and the profile author so that you can verify that the profile was not tampered with between the time that it was authored and the time that you execute it. InSpec sign works by using shared keys so that you have one private key that you keep private, and you have one public key, a verification key that you distribute along with the signed profile. So let's have a look at how this works. So Here we go. Going to show you my terminal window here. And let's have a look at the profile that I'm going to use. It's just a regular old profile, just a regular old thing. And we're going to run InSpec sign profile on it. And I have to provide a key name. So this key is stored in my InSpec keys directory in my my user /dot InSpec /keys directory, but the verification keys can be stored in several different locations, including distributed along with InSpec itself, and they can also be fetched from the web. As you can see, it first vendored the profile, meaning that it fetched all of its dependencies and packaged them up alongside the profile itself, and then it generated the IAF file. And then it signed it with the key. So let's see if we can verify this profile. So verification analyzes an IAF file, determines which key was used within it, and then checks for the verification key and tries to confirm that the profile is valid. In this case, it is valid. Very good. Excellent. Let's have a look at that file and see if we can determine what it is. It says it's a binary file. We do take a look at it, and yes, it is a binary file. It says InSpec profile 2, use InSpec export to view this file. Let's do that, because when you receive a binary file, you might want to have a look at it and see what's inside it. You'd want to be able to list the controls, for example. So what export does is it examines the file and determines what controls are in it, and then exports the controls by default in YAML format. So this allows you to look at the file, look at the profile and examine what's inside of it. And here you can see the controls. It lists off all of these things, which are mostly blank, but it actually lists the source control as well. So it actually has the source code of the control so you can see what it is. But you get all the control IDs and the impact and that sort of thing. Everything you need to know about the control so that you would be able to do inputs, you'd be able to include the controls in your downstream profiles, everything you need. You can also export the metadata and all sorts of other things with it. And then finally, the question you may be wondering is, can I treat this like anything else? Yes, of course you can. You can execute it just like any other profile. You can just execute it, and so long as you have the distribution key, it'll just work. So here we go, we're executing it, and InSpec is looking at the file. First, it does verify the file internally, and then it will execute it. InSpec will refuse to execute a file that it can't verify. So it maintains that chain of trust for you. And that is InSpec sign. All right, so that was InSpec sign. Let's learn about the next thing, which is InSpec suggest. So InSpec Suggest is one of the most exciting new features that we are releasing in InSpec 6. We are so excited about InSpec Suggest. InSpec Suggest solves one of the biggest problems that new users of InSpec have, which is, what in the world profile should I run on it? Chef provides over 300 new profiles with InSpec or with Chef Automate. And there are hundreds of other profiles that are available on the web and elsewhere in the ecosystem. So the question is, what profile should I run? Sometimes you have some idea as to what's on a system, and other times you don't. The classic example of this would be if you maintain a container registry and you don't know what's in the containers, and you want to be able to, given a container image, you want to be able to run something that would tell you what's in the image and what profiles you should run on it. Is there Nginx installed? Is there Apache installed? Is there MongoDB? What's inside this thing? What operating system is it? What profile should I use? Well, InSpec Suggest exactly solves that problem. So let's do a demo of InSpec Suggest. Again, I'm very excited about this. I myself worked on this feature along with Sonu, and we are very excited about InSpec Suggest. So let's have a look at InSpec Suggest. So to run InSpec Suggest, it's very simple. You just say InSpec Suggest, and it will run locally on your system. Now, my system happens to be a Macintosh system, so I would hope that it would tell me that I should run a macOS profile. Let's see what it comes up with. So we get a quick little progress bar as it runs the scan, and then it recommends the CIS Apple Mac OS 10.15 profile for me, which is a very good suggestion because I'm running Mac OS 10.15. That's a great suggestion. Let's try running on a remote target. So here I'm going to run it on a virtual machine that I have running. So we're going to connect to a remote machine. Because it uses the -T option, you can run this on a cloud machine. You can run it on all sorts of things, anything that you can target using the -T option, which means anything InSpec can connect to, it can connect to and run a profile on it, and it will be able to scan for it and find the best fit. So this found all sorts of goodies. It found that it was running Apache. It found that it was running Tomcat. It found that it was running Ubuntu 18, and it found that it was running MongoDB. So that found all sorts of great suggestions for you to run on that system. So let's move on here. That is InSpec Suggest. We are very excited about InSpec Suggest. And I think that's going to have a lot of potential for people, especially when you're a new user and you want to find out what the potential of InSpec is. What can InSpec do for me? InSpec Suggest will tell you exactly what it is. It's a great little recommendation engine. All right. Finally, we come to InSpec Parallel, one of the most powerful features we have ever developed for InSpec. InSpec Parallel allows you to run InSpec exec jobs simultaneously. In other words, run more than one scan at the same time. This is a very powerful feature. It allows you to read jobs from a file or from a script, and most recently, even from standard input. Each job can run different profiles, and each job can even run on different target systems or a combination of the two. You could run different profiles on different target systems if you want. And finally, it even supports dynamic templating for writing output files. So you can have your list of jobs be dynamically generated by ERB templating. There's so much this thing can do. And unfortunately, we don't have time to do much of that. But please be sure to catch the other presentation, Parallelism in Cloud Security, which will tell you all about the many features that InSpec Parallel has and show you some of the deeper examples. Here, we can only just scratch the surface. So let's see a demo real quick of InSpec Parallel in action. All right. Okay, so let's have a look at InSpec Parallel. All right, so InSpec Parallel takes option files. Let's have a look at an option file. That's not the one I want. 3 different profiles, that's one I want. So what these option files are simply lists of arguments that are passed to InSpec exec. So all I'm going to pass to InSpec exec is the name of a profile and a reporter option. And here I'm going to pass 3 different sets of options to InSpec exec. I'm going to pass an option that says run the SSH baseline and write its output to a file named SSH. Here I'm going to say run the Apache baseline, and another one saying run the Linux baseline profile. I'm going to tell it to run 3 different profiles. All right, let's try that. There we go. So I'm going to run InSpec Parallel exec against a dummy profile, and I'm going to say connect to a remote machine, and I'm going to say run it with this option file, 3 different profiles. What we're going to see is a master command output here that shows the progress of running this. We're going to see in the first 3 slots different progress as it connects and executes. So it runs the second slot first, and then the first and third slots are going to run at about the same time. As we can see, the first and third slots run in parallel. There we go. Different executions run at different speeds because that's just how it is. You can run many things in parallel. You can have hundreds of jobs running in multiple slots at the same time. You can do all sorts of powerful things. Let's look at the logs file. Here in the logs file, we got the output as well as some log output from the various files, and there we go. All right, so let's switch back to the main presentation. There we go, and that concludes the new features in InSpec 6. We are so excited about InSpec 6. Can't wait to hear your questions. So looking forward to what you've got for us. Are there any questions?